To set up our scene, we're going to create ground and wall objects, add light, and change our camera view from perspective to orthographic. The hierarchy window here shows all game objects currently in a scene. I open a new 3D project, as I just did. I'm automatically given a 3D scene to work in that has a perspective camera. So the camera here, under projection, it's listed as perspective, which is just fine for now, but we're going to change it later. The perspective camera is associated with 3D games because this type of camera sees depth, and that means that game objects appear smaller the further away they are from the camera. And the other option is you see orthographic, and an orthographic camera sees no depth, so everything is just sort of layered on top of each other, and it ends up looking sort of flat and 2D. In our project, we're going to use an orthographic camera, but we'll still be using 3D objects in the game. This will give us the flat 2D view of our objects, but will allow us to use some of the benefits of a 3D world like shadowing. So I'm first going to create a game object, a cube. This will be our first. You see it appears in hierarchy. And on my scene tab, where I can manipulate objects in the scene, I can move around with these arrows, which changes the position. You can see I'm moving the X right now. I'd suggest playing around with that a little bit to see what it changes. I'm going to keep mine at 0, 0, 0 for right now. So if I click on the Game tab, you can see what the cube looks like in our game. We have no light, so it's dark, so you can't really tell a lot about what's going on. You can kind of see here there's some little edges here, and that's because we're on the perspective camera. So we're going to go ahead and change the camera to orthographic. So click on main camera, and on projection, click that and change it to orthographic. You see now we've got a perfect square because now it's just seeing things flat on. So we've changed that to orthographic. And now let's go back to the cube. You'll see that it's still dark right now. So let's go ahead and create some light. So we're going to create a light object that's kind of like the sun, and that's a directional light. And it doesn't matter the position of the directional light because it's just sort of emitting intense sun rays, you can imagine, but the rotation does ultimately matter for the direction of shadows. We can keep it where it is right now for its rotation at 50, negative 30, 0. So let's go back to the cube, and when you click on it, you can see information about it in Inspector. We've got, as all game objects have, we have it transform, and the transform gives you 3 vector 3s, and that's position, rotation, and scale. And the vector 3s, they hold 3 numbers represented by X, Y, and Z. So you can also change position, rotation, and scale by just inserting numbers in here. So we're going to start by changing the scale. We want this cube eventually to represent ground, so we're going to make it a lot wider. So let's change it to 20. That looks good. And we'll make it a little taller. We'll change Y to 3. And I want to lower it a little bit, the position. So in position, it's Y-axis again. That's your up and down axis. I'm going to change it to negative 3. A little higher, negative 2. You can play around with that also to make things taller if you want. So now we're going to rename it. In Inspector, just highlight the name here, type in ground, and enter. You'll see it also comes with a box collider. The box collider is sort of the thing that tells it, the object, how much space it takes up right now. It also has materials list here, and right now it's just the default diffuse, which is that kind of whitish color. So we're going to make a new material for it. So you do that in Project tab. You can either click Create and then click Material, or you can just right-click inside of the project area, click Create Material. Go ahead and we'll call this ground material. And I'm going to make it brown. You can find it on the color palette here, or you can type in the numbers. It's on RGBA, which represents red, green, blue, and alpha is how transparent the object is. So right now it's totally opaque because it's maxed out at 255. So go ahead and close it, drag the material. You can either put it on the game object in hierarchy. You can also, if you're in the scene tab, I'll switch to scene, you could also drag it directly to the scene. So I'm also going to change the view that we have in the scene to make it match the kind of 2D look we have in the camera in the game view from the camera. And you do that by clicking this little 2D button here. Boom. And I use that. I kind of go back and forth in my project to sometimes see what things look like from the side. You can also get closer to the object by scrolling in with your mouse, scrolling out. If you want to kind of tip the view, so when you're out of 2D, so this is in the 3D view, if you press Alt or Option, you get this eye, and if you click, you can move the world around. That's not changing anything actually about the game, it's just changing what you're seeing. So I'm going to go back to 2D. Now we've renamed the object ground. Great. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this object so we can have some walls so that eventually our character will have limits. There are different ways to limit where a character goes, but this is one. So go ahead and you can Command D, duplicate the object, or you can right click and click duplicate. So now this ground, let's go ahead and you'll see it's actually directly on top of the other ground object because we duplicated everything about them. So first, let's rename this wall, enter, and we're going to rotate it to make it the length vertical. So I tend to have to play around with this a little bit, but on the Z value for rotation, try putting in 90. There we go. And then you can manually slide it across like this. And you can also check to see what it looks like on the camera by clicking Game View. Okay. We'll go back to Scene. Now let's duplicate our wall, Command D, and then I'm going to drag it to the other side. Go back to Game View. Okay, you can rearrange those to make it nice and even if you want. But right now that's all we need to set up our scene, and then we can start building our character.